Buy a cow, get a working Apache woman for free, shouted the farmer, until a cowboy stepped in. The sun rose slowly over the small town of Redstone, casting long golden rays across the dusty streets and wooden houses. It was a quiet morning, and most of the townspeople were still at home, tending to their chores or enjoying a simple breakfast. The smell of fresh bread and coffee drifted through the air, mixing with the faint scent of hay from the nearby barns. In the distance, a bell rang, signaling the opening of the marketplace. It was the heart of the town, where everyone gathered to trade goods, exchange news, and catch up on the latest gossip. Among the villagers, there was one person whose presence always caused a stir: Farmer McAllister. He was a tall man with broad shoulders, a sunburned face, and a voice that could carry across the entire marketplace. He was known for his loud, often shocking announcements. Some people found him entertaining, while others shook their heads at his eccentric ways. Today, however, he had something even more outrageous planned. As the marketplace came to life, people set up their stalls with vegetables, fruits, handmade tools, and livestock. The chatter of buyers and sellers filled the air, punctuated by the occasional clatter of hooves as horses and cows moved through the square. Children ran around, laughing and chasing each other, while older men and women inspected goods carefully, bargaining and trading with practiced ease. It was a typical busy morning, yet there was an unusual tension that people could not ignore. Whispers began to circulate about the announcement that had appeared on a crude wooden sign outside Farmer McAllister's stall. The sign read in large, bold letters, "Buy a cow, get a working Apache woman for free." At first, many townspeople thought it was a joke. They laughed nervously, unsure if they had read it correctly. Some covered their mouths in disbelief, while others shook their heads in disapproval. Mothers pulled their children close, worried that the words were inappropriate or harmful. The local baker muttered under his breath about how far McAllister had gone this time. The marketplace, which had been calm just moments ago, now buzzed with murmurs and uneasy glances. People came closer to see what the commotion was about, forming a small circle around the farmer's stall. Farmer McAllister stood behind a wooden table, grinning widely. He had several cows lined up in a neat row, their shiny coats glinting in the sunlight. He waved his arms dramatically and shouted in a voice that seemed almost too loud for the morning calm. "Step right up, buy a cow today, and I'll throw in a working Apache woman for free. Don't miss this rare opportunity." The words fell over the crowd like a heavy, strange cloud. A few men laughed awkwardly, unsure whether they should join in or protest. Some young boys whispered excitedly to each other, not fully understanding the meaning, but sensing that something unusual was happening. Many of the women in the crowd exchanged worried looks. There was a sense of discomfort, as though the normal rules of decency had been stretched too far. Still, no one immediately dared to challenge McAllister. His loud voice and confident posture often silenced any opposition before it could form. Among the people gathering, there was a young cowboy named Samuel. He had grown up on the outskirts of Redstone, helping his father tend cattle and learning the ways of honesty, fairness, and courage. Samuel was tall, with dark hair and calm, steady eyes. He had a quiet presence but was known for standing up when he saw something wrong. Today, he had come to the marketplace to buy some supplies and check on his own cattle, but the unusual sign immediately drew his attention. His eyebrows furrowed, and he walked closer to the stall, listening to McAllister's words with a growing sense of unease. Behind the farmer, there stood a young Apache woman. Her name was Ayana, and she had come to the town to find work and a better life. She was strong, intelligent, and careful, with eyes that seemed to understand the world in ways few others did. Yana had been observing the crowd silently, standing tall despite the awkwardness of the situation. She did not speak, but her calm, composed demeanor suggested she was not easily intimidated. Yet the farmer's words made her uncomfortable. She had hoped to be recognized for her skills and character, not offered as a bonus with livestock. Still, she stayed quiet, waiting to see how the crowd would react. The townspeople began to murmur loudly. "What does he mean by that?" asked an older woman, clutching her basket tightly. "This is not proper," said a man with a thick mustache, shaking his head. "He can't just advertise a person like an object." Others in the crowd were less vocal, unsure how to respond or fearing the farmer's sharp tongue. But the air was thick with tension. Everyone could sense that this was more than just a strange joke. It was a moment that would test their morals, their understanding of right and wrong, and their respect for one another. Samuel stepped closer, his boots crunching on the dry dirt of the marketplace. He studied the farmer carefully, noting his confident grin and the way he seemed to expect applause rather than criticism. Samuel's mind raced. He knew that challenging McAllister openly would not be easy. The farmer had a reputation for being loud and stubborn, and many people avoided confrontation just to keep the peace. But something inside Samuel would not let him ignore the injustice he saw. He glanced at Ayanna, noting the way her hands rested calmly at her sides and the quiet strength in her posture. She deserved respect, not a crude advertisement. He clenched his jaw and prepared himself to speak. Meanwhile, children pressed close to the front of the crowd, curious but unaware of the implications. They giggled and pointed at the sign, repeating the words they could barely understand. Some of the adults tried to shoo them away, worried about the message they were absorbing. Conversations bubbled up from all sides, with some people saying the farmer was merely trying to make money, while others argued that it was offensive and unacceptable. The marketplace, which had been a place of simple trade, had transformed into a place of moral debate. Every person there felt the weight of the moment, whether they wanted to or not. As the morning wore on, more people gathered, drawn by the unusual advertisement. The chatter became louder, with groups forming to discuss what they had seen. Some older men spoke quietly about the old ways and traditions, wondering if times were changing too quickly. Some young women whispered about the need to respect others and value their skills rather than treat them as objects. Through it all, Farmer McAllister remained at his stall, shouting over the noise and trying to keep the attention on his cows. Yet, beneath his loud exterior, there was a flicker of uncertainty. He noticed the disapproving looks, the whispers, and the steady gaze of the cowboy who had arrived to watch carefully. Yana remained silent, but her mind was active. She thought about her life, her journey to the town, and her hopes for a better future. She remembered the lessons from her family about courage, independence, and dignity. She knew she would not let anyone make decisions for her or treat her as something less than human. Her heart beat steadily, and she prepared herself to act if needed. The crowd might see her as a prize or an object, but she would prove that she was a person of her own mind, capable of standing tall in the face of challenges. By mid-morning, the tension in the marketplace had reached its peak. People stood in small clusters, whispering and debating, while others openly criticized the farmer. Some buyers had left, unwilling to support his stall under such conditions. Yet others lingered, curious or hesitant, unsure of how to react. Samuel stepped closer to Ayanna, silently offering support and understanding. Their eyes met briefly, and in that small, quiet moment, a sense of solidarity passed between them. The stage was set for a confrontation that would challenge the beliefs of the townspeople, the actions of the farmer, and the courage of those willing to stand for what was right. The morning sun climbed higher, beating down on the dusty streets and filling the marketplace with heat and light. It was a day that no one in Redstone would soon forget. A day that began with a shocking announcement, had already started to reveal the deeper truths of justice, respect, and courage. And as the crowd waited, holding their breath, the story of Farmer McAllister, Ayanna, and the young cowboy was only just beginning. The crowd in Redstone's marketplace continued to grow, buzzing with confusion, curiosity, and unease. People whispered among themselves, unsure how to respond to the shocking announcement. Mothers held their children close, while older men frowned, muttering about morals and decency. The young boys who had laughed moments ago now looked around, sensing the tension in the air. Even some of the merchants, busy with their own stalls, paused to watch the unfolding scene. Farmer McAllister, unaware of how strongly people were reacting, continued to shout, his voice booming across the marketplace. "Step right up. Buy a cow today and get a working Apache woman for free. You won't find a better deal anywhere." Yana stood quietly behind the line of cows. Her hands rested calmly at her sides, but inside she felt a storm of emotions. She had traveled to Redstone hoping to find work where she could contribute honestly and earn respect for her skills. Instead, she was being offered like a prize, as if she were an object rather than a person. She had learned to be patient and careful in a world that often judged her harshly because of who she was. But this situation tested her in a way she had never experienced before. She looked out over the crowd, noticing the mix of reactions, some people curious, some uncomfortable, and some quietly disapproving. Samuel, the young cowboy, moved closer, his eyes scanning the faces in the crowd. He had grown up learning how to read people, understanding their moods and intentions. From the first moment he saw McAllister's sign, he had known it was wrong. He could see the unease in the villagers' eyes and the tension that hung over the marketplace like a thick cloud. Samuel had never been one to stand aside when he saw injustice, even when it was inconvenient or dangerous. Today, he felt a strong urge to act, not just for Ayanna but for the principles he had grown up valuing: fairness, respect, and honesty. He walked steadily toward the front of the crowd, making sure to keep a calm and non-threatening posture. He did not shout or push his way through. Instead, he moved with quiet determination, letting his presence be felt. People noticed him and stepped aside respectfully, sensing that he was different from the others. Samuel stopped a few feet away from Farmer McAllister and spoke in a firm but polite voice. "Sir, what you are saying is wrong. This woman is not something to give away. She is a person and she deserves respect." McAllister's grin faltered slightly, though he tried to maintain his loud, confident tone. "Now hold on, young man," he said, waving a hand dismissively. "I'm just trying to make a sale. It's a promotion, nothing more. People get a cow, they get help around the farm. Isn't that fair?" Samuel shook his head slowly. "It is not fair to treat a human being like an object. She is not a prize. She is not property. You cannot decide her life for her, and you cannot offer her to someone as if she were part of the deal. That is not how people should be treated." The crowd went quiet at Samuel's words. The murmurs and whispers that had been filling the marketplace paused, and all eyes turned to him. Some people looked at him with admiration, appreciating his courage to speak out. Others looked at him with caution, unsure whether it was wise to challenge Farmer McAllister so openly. Even McAllister's face showed a flicker of doubt, though he quickly tried to cover it with a laugh. "Oh, come on, son. Don't be so serious. It's just a joke. People love a bit of excitement with their shopping." Yana stepped forward slowly. Her voice was calm and steady, but it carried authority. "I am not a joke," she said. The words were clear and firm, and they cut through the chatter of the marketplace like a knife. The crowd turned to look at her, some shocked that she had spoken, others quietly impressed by her confidence. "I am a person. I have skills, I have work I can do, and I have a right to choose my own path. I will not be given away like a thing. I will decide where I go, who I work for, and how I live my life." For a moment, no one spoke. The marketplace seemed to hold its breath. The children stared wide-eyed, and even some of the older merchants felt a pang of shame for remaining silent. Samuel looked at Ayanna and nodded slightly, silently offering his support. He could see that she was brave, strong, and capable, and he felt a surge of respect for her courage. McAllister, on the other hand, looked taken aback. He had expected fear or compliance, not a clear, confident refusal. "Well, now, I didn't expect that," he said, scratching his head nervously. "I just thought people would see it as a bit of fun." "It is not fun when someone's dignity is at stake," Samuel replied. "You cannot simply use people to attract buyers. That is wrong, and it is not acceptable in this town." Some people in the crowd began to murmur in agreement, nodding their heads. Others, who had been unsure before, now found their voice. "He's right," said one man, stepping forward. "We should not allow such behavior here. Everyone deserves respect." Another woman added, "I am ashamed that I stood by quietly. This is not how we treat people." The crowd's mood began to shift, and the air that had been heavy with uncertainty grew lighter with support for Ayanna. Ayanna continued to speak, her voice growing stronger as she described her life and her skills. "I can cook, I can clean, I can help on a farm, and I can do many other things," she said. "But I do not belong to anyone. I make my own choices. I work because I want to, not because someone decides I must. I deserve respect for who I am, not just for what I can do." Samuel watched carefully as the crowd reacted. He noticed that many people were inspired by Ayanna's words. Mothers nodded to their children, teaching them by example that every person has value. Young men and women realized that strength is not just physical, but also moral and intellectual. Even some of the children began to whisper to each other about what it meant to treat people fairly and with kindness. Farmer McAllister's bravado began to fade. He could no longer ignore the growing disapproval. People were speaking up, and he realized that his loud voice was not enough to dominate the situation. For the first time, he felt the weight of responsibility and the consequences of his words. I didn't mean to hurt anyone," he said quietly, his tone losing its earlier confidence. "I just wanted to sell cows, that's all. I never thought it would cause so much trouble." Samuel stepped forward again, his tone firm but not angry. "It is not just about selling cows. It is about respecting people. You have a choice now. You can continue to treat her as an object, or you can admit your mistake and treat her with the dignity she deserves." Ayanna looked at McAllister calmly, her eyes steady and unwavering. "I will not accept being treated as a prize," she said. "I will find work where I am respected, and I will choose the life I want to live. I hope you understand that now." The marketplace had fallen completely silent. Even the wind seemed to pause as people processed what they had just witnessed. The children learned a lesson in courage and respect. The townspeople learned a lesson in morality and justice. And Farmer McAllister, who had thought he could shock and amuse the crowd, learned a lesson in humility and the importance of treating others with fairness. Samuel stayed by Ayanna's side, silently offering his support. He knew that the confrontation was not yet over, but he also knew that a change had begun. The townspeople were beginning to understand that respect and dignity were more important than profit or entertainment. And Ayanna, with her quiet courage, had become a symbol of strength and independence in the marketplace of Redstone. By the time the sun reached its highest point, the atmosphere had shifted. The noise of the marketplace returned, but it was different now. People were talking about fairness, respect, and courage. They were discussing the right way to treat others and the importance of standing up for what is right. And while the day had begun with an outrageous announcement, it was clear that something far more meaningful had taken its place, a lesson in justice, empathy, and human dignity. As Samuel and Ayanna walked through the marketplace together, they felt a quiet satisfaction. They knew that the confrontation with Farmer McAllister had changed more than just one morning. It had started a conversation that could transform the town itself. People had seen courage in action, the power of speaking up, and the importance of treating others with respect. And in that moment, Both Samuel and Ayanna realized that sometimes the smallest acts of bravery can create the greatest change. The marketplace of Redstone was alive with activity, but the mood had changed since the morning. The earlier shock of Farmer McAllister's outrageous announcement had settled into a tense curiosity. People whispered among themselves, glancing at Ayanna and Samuel as they stood near the front of the crowd. Some of the townspeople had begun to understand the seriousness of the situation, while others remained uncertain, hesitant to speak out. The farmer himself had fallen silent for a moment, his confident grin replaced by a thoughtful frown. He had never expected anyone to challenge him like this, and certainly not a young cowboy and a woman he had thought would be too timid to speak up. Samuel's presence was calm but firm. He had positioned himself slightly in front of Ayanna, not to dominate the scene but to offer support. His dark eyes scanned the crowd, noticing subtle reactions. A mother gripping her child's hand, a shopkeeper nodding quietly in agreement, a few young men murmuring about fairness. Samuel had grown up understanding the importance of courage and justice, and he could sense that the town was at a turning point. It was not enough for him to speak. He needed the townspeople to see that respect for others was not optional, it was essential. Yana, meanwhile, stood tall and composed. She had felt fear when she first arrived in the marketplace, but she had learned to face challenges with clarity and strength. Her gaze swept over the crowd, noting both those who supported her silently and those who still seemed doubtful. She knew that words alone would not suffice. Her presence, her confidence, and her willingness to speak up were just as important as any argument she could make. She took a deep breath, ready to continue her message. "People of Redstone," she began, her voice steady and clear, "I have come here to work honestly and to live my life with dignity. I have skills that I am proud of, and I want to contribute to this community. But I will not be treated as a prize or a reward for buying something else. I am a person, and I deserve the same respect that each of you expects for yourselves and your families." Her words rippled through the crowd. Some people nodded slowly, while others whispered in agreement. Even the children, who had been curious earlier, now listened more attentively. Jana continued, emphasizing her independence and the importance of personal choice. "I can cook, I can help on a farm, I can assist in many ways, but my work must be chosen by me and my life must be my own. No one can make that decision for me. That is what it means to live with respect." Samuel stepped forward slightly. He addressed the crowd, not just the farmer. "We all come to this marketplace to trade and to live our lives," he said. "But trading goods should never come at the cost of another person's freedom. Every person here deserves respect, and no one has the right to treat anyone else as an object. Today, we have a choice, to continue old habits or to do what is right." The crowd began to react more openly. Murmurs grew louder and people started to speak their minds. Some were shocked by the bravery of Ayanna and Samuel. Others were relieved that someone had spoken out on their behalf, giving them permission to voice their own concerns. "He's right," said an older man, stepping forward from behind his stall. "I've seen too many people treated unfairly over the years, and I will not stay silent now. Everyone deserves respect, no matter who they are." A young woman in the crowd spoke next. "I didn't know what to think at first," she admitted, "but seeing her stand there with courage, it makes me realize that we must support each other. We must not allow anyone to be treated as less than human." Her words drew nods and quiet murmurs of agreement from those nearby. The children, observing the reactions of the adults, began to understand the importance of speaking up and supporting fairness. Farmer McAllister tried to respond, his voice a mixture of frustration and confusion. "Now wait just a minute. I didn't mean to cause so much trouble. I was only trying to sell my cows. Isn't that what we all do, try to make a living?" Samuel shook his head, his expression serious. "Making a living does not justify harming others or disrespecting them." There is a difference between honest work and using people as tools or prizes. You have crossed that line. Gianna added calmly, we can all work and contribute without taking away the dignity of others. I am willing to work, but only in a place where I am respected and my choices matter. That is fair, and it is the right thing to do. Some townspeople began to speak up in support of Ayana. One man said, I will not buy a cow if it means anyone is being treated unfairly. Respect must come first. Another added, we should reward honesty and hard work, not cheap tricks and disrespect. The atmosphere in the marketplace began to change. The crowd, which had been tense and uncertain, now showed solidarity with Ayana and Samuel. Their voices combined created a powerful force that the farmer could not ignore. McAllister, realizing that he had lost the support of the crowd, took a deep breath. His usual bravado was gone, replaced by a rare humility. I see now that I was wrong, he said, quieter than before. I did not think about how my words would affect others. I was trying to attract attention, but I understand that it was hurtful. I am sorry. Samuel nodded slightly. Acknowledging a mistake is the first step toward making things right, but apology alone is not enough. Respect must be shown through action, not just words. Yana looked at McAllister with calm determination. You can start by treating people as equals, not as prizes. That is how trust and respect are built. I am willing to work in this town, but only in a way that honors my skills and my choices. That is what fairness looks like. The townspeople began to discuss among themselves how they could support a fair and just marketplace. Some merchants spoke of creating rules to prevent similar situations in the future. Mothers talked to their children about the lessons they were learning today. Even the young boys who had giggled earlier began to understand the importance of respect and personal dignity. The marketplace, once filled with simple trade and casual chatter, had transformed into a place of learning, reflection, and change. Samuel remained close to Ayana, offering quiet encouragement. You've done well, he said softly. Your courage is making a difference. People are starting to see the importance of fairness and respect. Yana nodded, her expression serious but composed. It is not just about me. It is about everyone here. If we all act with integrity, the town will become a better place for all of us. The farmer, standing among the cows he had hoped to sell, looked around at the crowd he had underestimated. He saw the shift in attitudes, the solidarity among the townspeople, and the quiet power of one person's courage. Slowly he realized that true respect could not be bought or advertised. It had to be earned through actions, honesty, and the way people treated each other. I understand, he said finally. I will change how I do things. I want this town to be a place where everyone is treated fairly. The marketplace began to return to its normal rhythm, though it was different now. People were still trading, still chatting, but there was a new sense of awareness. They were thinking about fairness, justice, and the value of every individual. Children learned lessons in courage and morality without needing to be lectured. The townspeople realized that even a small act of bravery, like standing up for what is right, could inspire change and bring a community closer together. Samuel and Ayana walked through the marketplace together, their heads held high. They knew that challenges would come in the future, but the events of the morning had already made a lasting impression. People had learned that respect could not be forced or bought. It had to be given freely and honored sincerely. And in that understanding, the town of Redstone had taken its first steps toward becoming a community where every person's dignity was recognized and valued. By the end of the day, the marketplace had quieted down. The sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the streets. Iana and Samuel stood near the edge of the square, watching as townspeople returned to their homes, thoughtful and reflective. The events of the morning and afternoon would be remembered for years to come, not as a tale of shock or humor, but as a story of courage, justice, and the power of speaking out. Even Farmer McAllister, who had started the day with a loud, outrageous announcement, walked away with a lesson learned. He had seen firsthand that words could harm, and that respect could not be taken lightly. He understood that his actions had consequences, and he resolved to treat people differently from that day forward. The marketplace, once just a place for trade, had become a place of education, reflection, and moral growth. And as the sun set over Redstone, casting a warm, golden light over the town, Samuel and Ayanna felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. They had stood together for what was right, and in doing so, they had begun to change the hearts and minds of an entire community. The story of that day, filled with courage, clarity, and the power of respect, would remain in the memories of Redstone's people for a long time. The morning that had begun with shock and confusion had now settled into a tense but meaningful conversation. Redstone's marketplace, usually a place for trade and casual chatter, had become the setting for a lesson in respect, courage, and justice. The townspeople were no longer just passive observers. They were part of a moment that would shape the character of their community. Farmer McAllister, who had begun the day with confidence and bravado, was now quiet, reflecting on the consequences of his words and actions. Ayanna stood near the row of cows, her calm and steady presence commanding attention. She had spoken clearly about her desire to be treated as a person, not an object, and her words had made an impact. Yet she knew that true understanding could not come from words alone. It required dialogue, patience, and willingness to listen. Samuel, standing beside her, noticed the subtle changes in the crowd. Faces that had been confused or disapproving now showed curiosity and contemplation. People were beginning to ask themselves difficult questions about fairness, dignity, and the way they treated others. "Thank you all for listening," Ayanna said, her voice gentle but firm. "I know this is not an easy conversation, but it is necessary. We can work together, trade together, and live together in this town, but only if everyone is treated with respect. I hope we can find a way to make that happen." Samuel stepped forward, turning to address the townspeople. "What Ayanna says is true. Respect and fairness are not just words, they are actions. It is not enough to listen or nod in agreement. We must change the way we behave, how we interact with each other, and the way we treat people every day. That includes the way we do business, the way we speak, and the way we support each other." The crowd murmured thoughtfully. Some people nodded in agreement, while others whispered to their neighbors, trying to make sense of what had happened. It was clear that the marketplace had become more than a place for trade. It had become a place of reflection, where each person was considering their own behavior and the kind of community they wanted to live in. Farmer McAllister, standing near the cows he had hoped to sell, spoke up finally. His voice was quieter than before, lacking its usual showmanship. "I realize now that I acted carelessly. I was thinking about selling cows, and I did not think about the impact of my words. I understand that what I did was wrong and I want to make amends, but I am not sure how to do that." Samuel looked at him carefully. "Acknowledging your mistake is the first step, but actions must follow. You can start by treating everyone in this town with respect, regardless of their background or skills. You can also help others understand that fairness and dignity are more important than profit or attention." Gianna nodded in agreement. "Respect cannot be bought or sold. It must be given freely and honored sincerely. If we all act with integrity, the town will be stronger and everyone will benefit." Some of the townspeople began to speak openly now, offering suggestions and reflections. An older woman said, "I have been in this town for many years, and I have seen people treated unfairly before. Today has reminded me that it is never too late to learn and change." "We can all do better," a young man added. "I admit that I laughed at first, thinking it was just a joke, but I see now that respect is not something to joke about. Everyone deserves dignity." Even the children who had been curious and wide-eyed earlier were paying attention. They listened carefully as the adults discussed fairness and responsibility. Some of them whispered to each other about what it meant to be brave and to stand up for what is right. The lesson that had started with a shocking announcement was now reaching every corner of the marketplace, touching the hearts and minds of the town's youngest members. Samuel and Ayanna walked slowly through the crowd, listening to the conversations and offering encouragement. They noticed small gestures of change. A merchant apologizing to a customer for being rude, a mother explaining to her child why it is important to treat everyone with respect, a young man helping an elderly neighbor carry a basket of goods. These small acts, seemingly insignificant, were part of the larger transformation that had begun in Redstone. Farmer McAllister, observing the changes around him, felt a mixture of regret and hope. He had started the day thinking only about profit, attention, and sales. Now he understood that his actions had consequences far beyond what he had imagined. He approached Ayanna and Samuel, his posture cautious but sincere. "I want to do better," he said. "I do not want to cause harm, and I want to be part of a community where people are treated fairly. Can you help me understand how I can make amends?" Samuel looked at Ayanna, who nodded slightly. "Yes," he said. "The first step is to recognize your mistakes and take responsibility. The next step is to show through your actions that you are committed to fairness and respect. That means listening to others, treating everyone with dignity, and understanding that every person has the right to choose their own path." Gianna spoke directly to McAllister. "You can also help others in the town understand these values. You have influence and you can use it for good. You can set an example by showing that respect, fairness, and kindness matter more than profit or attention. That is how change begins." The farmer listened carefully, absorbing every word. He could see the sincerity in Ayanna's eyes and the calm determination in Samuel's posture. For the first time, he realized that true leadership was not about loud words or flashy promotions. It was about integrity, fairness, and the courage to admit mistakes. He felt a shift within himself, a desire to be better, not just for his own sake, but for the community he had long been part of. The townspeople continued to discuss the situation among themselves. Some suggested creating rules for the marketplace to ensure that no one would be treated unfairly in the future. Others spoke about teaching children the importance of courage, respect, and empathy. A sense of unity began to grow, as people realized that they were not alone in their desire for a just and fair community. The marketplace, which had been a place of shock and tension, was now a place of dialogue, understanding, and growth. Yana's story also inspired personal reflection among the townspeople. Many realized that they had unknowingly accepted or tolerated unfair treatment of others in the past. They began to think about the ways they could improve their own behavior, how they could be more respectful, and how they could support fairness in everyday life. Samuel noticed the subtle changes, the way people spoke to each other, the careful consideration in their gestures, the newfound awareness that respect was not optional but essential. Even the younger children began to grasp the lesson. They asked questions about fairness and kindness, and adults responded with thoughtful explanations. "It is important to treat everyone with dignity," a mother explained to her daughter. "No one should be treated as less than human. Everyone has the right to make their own choices and to be respected for who they are." The sun climbed higher, casting a warm light over the marketplace. The cows in McAllister's stall looked calm, the children played quietly in the corners, and merchants continued their work with a renewed sense of purpose. The tension that had filled the morning air was replaced with a sense of hope, understanding, and possibility. Samuel and Ayanna continued their conversation with McAllister, discussing ways to make the marketplace fair and safe for everyone. They spoke about establishing clear rules, encouraging mutual respect, and ensuring that every person's dignity was honored. McAllister listened carefully, asking questions and taking notes. He realized that this was not just about avoiding mistakes, it was about creating a culture of respect that could last for generations. By the end of the day, the atmosphere in Redstone's marketplace had changed completely. What had begun as a shocking and troubling event had become an opportunity for education, reflection, and growth. The townspeople had learned that courage, fairness, and respect could transform not only individual interactions, but the entire community. They had witnessed firsthand the power of standing up for what is right and supporting those who are treated unfairly. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the streets, Samuel and Ayanna walked together through the marketplace. They looked around at the people who had once been skeptical or hesitant, now engaged in thoughtful conversations and small acts of kindness. The lesson of the day had reached far beyond the immediate confrontation. It had touched the hearts and minds of everyone present. Farmer McAllister, standing near his cows, reflected on the events of the day. He understood that he had been wrong and that his actions had consequences. More importantly, he recognized the importance of using his influence for good. He resolved to treat everyone with respect, to listen carefully, and to lead by example. The marketplace, once just a place of business, had become a symbol of growth, learning, and moral awakening. And as the evening settled over Redstone, a sense of quiet satisfaction filled the air. The people of the town had learned valuable lessons about courage, dignity, and justice. They had seen how one person's bravery could inspire change, how honest words could transform a community, and how respect and empathy could create a stronger, more united society. Samuel and Ayanna knew that the journey was not over, but they also knew that they had taken an important step. The town of Redstone would never forget the day when courage and fairness reshaped their marketplace, teaching lessons that would last for generations. The next morning, Redstone woke to a sense of calm and quiet optimism. The marketplace, which had been the center of tension and controversy just the day before, now felt different. There was a new energy in the air, one that combined hope, reflection, and a commitment to fairness. People moved about their routines with a newfound awareness. Children ran and laughed, but they also listened to the lessons their parents shared about respect and courage. Merchants arranged their goods carefully, not just for trade, but also with a sense of responsibility toward everyone in the marketplace. The town had begun to change, and the seeds planted yesterday were starting to grow. Ayanna walked through the square, her steps confident and steady. She had been reflecting on the events of the previous day, thinking about how courage, honesty, and dignity could influence an entire community. She had been worried about coming to Redstone alone, not knowing whether anyone would support her or if she would be seen only as an object of curiosity. But yesterday had shown her that standing up for herself and speaking the truth could inspire others. She felt a quiet pride in what had been accomplished, and she knew her journey was only beginning. Samuel walked beside her, as he had throughout the previous day. He had watched the marketplace shift from shock and confusion to reflection and understanding. He knew that the change did not happen overnight, but he also understood the power of a single courageous voice to influence many. Samuel had grown up learning that fairness and respect were more important than profit, attention, or popularity. Yesterday had been a test of those principles, and he had been proud to support Ayanna and help guide the community toward understanding. Farmer McAllister, who had been at the center of the controversy, was no longer shouting for attention. He moved quietly among the villagers, offering apologies where needed and listening to their concerns. His attitude had changed significantly. He had realized that respect and fairness were far more valuable than quick profit or spectacle. Slowly but surely, he began to understand that his influence could be used for good, to model integrity and honesty for the town. Gianna had found work with a family that respected her abilities and her independence. She helped with household chores, farm work, and cooking, all tasks she approached with skill and care. But the most important thing was that she chose this work herself. She was valued for her talents, not treated as an object or a prize. People who once had whispered or laughed now spoke to her with respect, asking for advice or sharing small conversations about life and community. She had become a symbol of dignity and resilience in Redstone, showing that strength came not only from physical skill, but also from courage and self-respect. Samuel continued to help Ayanna when needed, though he knew she was fully capable on her own. He had become a quiet mentor and friend, offering advice and support without overshadowing her achievements. The townspeople had begun to notice their cooperation and respect for each other. It was not romance or special attention that defined their relationship. It was mutual respect, shared values, and a commitment to doing what was right. Children in the marketplace watched them with admiration, learning that kindness, courage, and fairness were traits worth emulating. Farmer McAllister, observing the positive changes around him, felt a sense of relief mixed with humility. He had learned the hard way that words and actions carried consequences. His loud voice and dramatic announcements had caused harm, but he had also learned that admitting mistakes and acting with integrity could heal wounds and rebuild trust. He began making small gestures of goodwill, helping others in the marketplace, and ensuring that his stall operated in a fair and respectful way. Slowly, the townspeople began to trust him again, not because he had promised to be better, but because they could see the changes in his actions and behavior. The community itself began to transform. Conversations about respect, fairness, and courage became more common. People discussed the events of the marketplace and reflected on their own actions. Parents taught their children the lessons they had learned, emphasizing that everyone deserved dignity and that standing up for what is right was important, even if it was uncomfortable. Merchants shared advice and support with one another, ensuring that no one would be treated unfairly in their shops or stalls. Redstone, once a quiet and ordinary town, had become a place where justice, empathy, and courage were recognized as values to uphold every day. Yana's influence extended beyond her work. She began helping others in small ways, teaching young girls how to take pride in their abilities, showing boys that respect and fairness were signs of strength, and assisting families who needed guidance or support. People turned to her not because she demanded attention, but because she had shown through her actions that she was wise, capable, and kind. Her story of courage inspired many to speak up, stand tall, and act with integrity. Samuel watched all of this quietly, proud of the progress they had made together. He knew that the change was not permanent yet, that it required constant attention and effort. But he also knew that the foundation had been laid. The town of Redstone had experienced a moment that would resonate for years to come, a moment that showed how courage, integrity, and empathy could transform not just one day, but an entire community. Even Farmer McAllister, who had once sought attention through shocking words, now embraced a new role. He became an advocate for fairness in the marketplace, setting clear standards for how people were treated and encouraging others to speak out against injustice. His loud voice was no longer used for spectacle. It was now a voice of responsibility and guidance. The townspeople slowly came to respect him not for his dramatic announcements, but for his willingness to change, learn, and support the community. By midday, the marketplace had settled into a comfortable rhythm. Merchants traded fairly, children played while learning lessons about courage and kindness, and adults conducted their business with a sense of responsibility and integrity. Jana worked with a quiet focus, respected and appreciated by everyone around her. Samuel continued to offer guidance when needed, but mostly observed the positive changes unfolding naturally. Redstone had become a town that valued respect, fairness, and cooperation, all lessons born from one moment of courage and moral clarity. As the sun began to set, casting long, golden shadows over the dusty streets, the townspeople gathered near the marketplace for a quiet moment of reflection. Some spoke about the lessons they had learned, while others listened, grateful for the opportunity to reconsider their behavior and attitudes. Children repeated the ideas of fairness and respect they had heard, internalizing the lessons in a simple but profound way. It was clear that the events of the past 2 days had left a lasting mark on the town, shaping the community's character and values for the future. Iana and Samuel stood together, looking at the marketplace with a quiet sense of accomplishment. They knew that the journey was ongoing, that life would continue to present challenges, that people might make mistakes, and that courage and fairness would always need to be upheld. But they also knew that the people of Redstone had taken the first steps toward building a community based on dignity, respect, and integrity. Farmer McAllister approached them, a humble smile on his face. "I want to thank you both," he said. "I did not understand before, but now I see the value of treating everyone with respect. You have shown me that actions matter more than words, and that fairness and courage can change not just a day, but a whole town." Iana nodded, her calm expression gentle but firm. "We all have a part to play," she said. "It is up to each of us to continue acting with integrity and kindness. Redstone has started to change, but it will only remain a strong, fair community if everyone continues to uphold these values." Samuel added, "Courage is not just about standing up once. It is about continuing to do what is right, even when it is difficult. Respect and fairness are habits we must practice every day, and by doing so, we make the town stronger for everyone." The townspeople watched and listened, understanding that these were not just words but guiding principles to live by. They had seen the power of standing up for what is right, and they had experienced the importance of empathy, courage, and integrity. The marketplace, once a place of shock and tension, had become a center for growth, learning, and positive change. As the evening settled over Redstone, the town glowed with a quiet, steady light, not from the sun, which had set, but from the actions and attitudes of its people. The lessons learned in the marketplace would continue to shape the community, guiding decisions, shaping interactions, and inspiring future generations. Courage, respect, and fairness had become the foundation of the town, and the story of Ayanna, Samuel, and Farmer McAllister would be remembered for years as a turning point in Redstone's history. The marketplace emptied slowly, but the impact of those events lingered. People went home with thoughts of integrity, kindness, and moral courage in their minds. Children repeated the lessons they had heard, eager to practice fairness in their own lives. The town had grown, not in wealth or size, but in understanding, empathy, and respect for one another. Gianna, now recognized for her talents and her courage, continued to live her life with independence and dignity. Samuel remained a steadfast supporter and friend, quietly helping others learn the importance of fairness and empathy. Farmer McAllister, forever changed by the events, became an example of humility, growth, and responsible leadership. Together, their story left a lasting impression on Redstone, proving that courage, moral clarity, and respect could truly transform a community. And as night fell over the quiet town, the stars shone brightly, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, light could emerge through courage, justice, and the choices of those willing to stand for what is right. Redstone had changed forever, and its people carried forward a legacy of fairness, dignity, and hope.